Good morning. Was sitting there this week thinking about change. So far last year we had to miss our Lenten dinners, our Easter sunrise, our Christmas Eve service, and we're looking at missing our Ash Wednesday service this year, our Lenten dinners, and maybe even our second Easter sunrise. I hope not, but it's looking like it. We're going to have to cancel. But we have to adapt. We adapted last year. But if you're like me sometimes, I am so tired of adapting to adapt to adapt to adapting. I want things to go back the way they were. But things can't go back to where they were. You know, I hear that from Dad now that I'm taking care of him. He and I both wish things were back like they used to be when he had two good legs and could walk and could see and drive and take care of himself and do the things he wanted to instead of needing constant care. But things change and those days are gone. They won't come back. Life changes and we change. This pandemic has changed us all. We must continue to adapt, to change. We've adapted the way we do our grocery shopping, the way we go to eat, the things we do for recreation, all kinds of things we've adapted. And we have to adapt the way we worship God. We've worshiped God in different ways today. We're doing things online, through the mail, cards, telephone, things that we kind of got away from. And just because they're different doesn't mean they're not good. Just because they're not the same as they were a couple years ago doesn't mean that it's bad or that it can't be good or that the Easter season is gone. Christmas still came. And we're still doing good and faithful worship. In 2 Corinthians 4:16 it says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us eternal glory that far outweighs them all." So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So we keep our eyes fixed on God. We're going to celebrate Lent. We're going to celebrate Easter, even if we don't have our dinner or the sunrise service or an Ash Wednesday service, except online. I'm hoping it'll be safe toward Easter so we can do those things, but it's coming. The resurrection is coming, just as Christmas came. In John 4, Jesus was talking to the woman at the well. And the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worship on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." You see, in that day, salvation was for the Jews. It had yet to come to the Gentiles. And you had to go to Jerusalem to worship. And that was one of the things that the Israelites held against the Samaritans. They built a temple and said, "We're going to worship God right here. We're not going to Jerusalem." And they called them pagans because they did that. But Jesus said there's going to come a time when you won't go on this mountain or that mountain, where you worship God in spirit and truth wherever you are. And that time is now. We are worshiping God in spirit and truth inside the building when we can, in the parking lot, on the radio, through Facebook, online sermons. The main thing is we worship in spirit and in truth. God is doing amazing things in this world. We just got to look and take notice of them. People are relearning to care about each other and to love each other again. There was a story back before Christmas of a young man in Charlestown. I think he was like 7 or 8, and he was ill, was dying, to tell you the truth, and he loved Jeeps. So they got a Jeep parade up the day before Christmas Eve, and it was Jeeps and vehicles and fire trucks and ambulances. Excuse me. Miles of Jeeps and cars came by that young man's house. I'm sorry, it says here he's 4 years old. I'm sorry, I made him older. 4-year-old. The papers estimated the line of cars and jeeps that came by this young man's house was 10 miles long. Can you imagine that? 10 miles long of a parade of cars. Most of these people, I'd say probably 99.9%, didn't know that boy. But they heard about him and wanted to take part. They wanted to bring joy to a dying young boy's heart. I saw where people from as far away as Colorado came, and Michigan. Can you imagine driving from Colorado to Charlestown, excuse me, to take part in a parade for a dying 4-year-old? People are helping each other. They're loving each other amidst the political anger and the division in this country now. God is changing hearts, and he's touching people, and he's doing it in ways that we've never even thought of, that we've never done before. You know, when we can't get out and do the things we used to, God will bring those people to us. I have an old coffee table. I hated it. Cheryl wouldn't let me get rid of it. Through 3 moves, we moved that coffee table. And finally, this week, when I moved Dad in the house, we put it in the garage, and there's nowhere for it. So Cheryl said, okay, she finally gave me permission to get rid of it. So Jesse put it on Facebook. Anybody wants it, come get it free. Well, a couple answered and came and picked it up, and we were talking, and they were getting it for a family, friends of theirs, who had nothing. They just got a place to live, a little house. They had no furniture at all, no washing machine, no dryer. They're washing the clothes in the bathtub, and they had no furniture whatsoever. So we gave them the coffee table. We had a pretty well brand new futon, a leather futon that we moved out when we put Dad's hospital bed in, and it's in the garage, so we gave them that too. And while we were talking, found out that they had no money, no food, no nothing. I mean, they basically really had nothing. So I arranged to get them some groceries. You know, through 3 moves, we moved that stupid coffee table. But God had us hold it until the right person needed it. Isn't he wonderful the way God works? Look at the results. God is working wonders in this world. But if we focus on what we don't have, the way things have changed, or what we used to have, we'll miss it all. You know, one of the theologians I really like is a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He didn't have a long life, but the life he lived actually changed lives. He lived from 1906 excuse me, to 1945, a short 39 years. But you know, God uses quantity over quality. Excuse me, backwards, quality over quantity. Jesus was only 33 when he went to the cross, but look what he did. Dietrich, excuse me, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born 4 February 1906, and he died 9th of April 1945. He was a German pastor and theologian. He was an anti-Nazi dissident. He was a key founding member of the Confessing Church. Excuse me, his writings on Christianity's role in the world have become influential, and the book, The Cost of Discipleship, is a modern classic taught in all the seminaries. But apart from his theological writings, Bonhoeffer is known for his staunch resistance to the Nazi dictatorship. He was very vocal in opposition to Hitler and what they were doing to the Jews, and he was arrested in April 1943 by the Gestapo, imprisoned at Tegau prison for 1.5 years. Then he was transferred to a Nazi concentration camp, and he was accused of being in the plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler, and he was tried in a trumped-up trial, and he was executed by hanging on the 9th of April, 1945. But what was remarkable about him was he was out of Germany. He knew what was coming, and he was in the United States. And he went back to fight the Nazi movement, knowing that it would probably cost him his life. In 1939, he saw what was coming, and he took the last steamer ship that crossed the ocean before the war back to Germany to start an underground seminary to train people in the Word of God and to fight the genocide that Hitler was doing. And he was arrested, and he spent from 1943 to 1945 in prison. And that's where he wrote a lot of his famous works. Sort of like St. Paul. Paul chose to appeal to Caesar as a Roman citizen so he could tell him the gospel, knowing that that would cause his death. Tradition tells us that Paul was beheaded in Rome as part of the execution of Christians ordered by Nero. There's not 100% documentation of how Paul died, but that's what they think. God can use us anywhere, in the midst of a pandemic, in a change, in a prison. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote a lot of these things that we study today in prison. Paul wrote what they call the prison epistles: Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. They're so named because they were written by Paul during one of his incarcerations. It's generally accepted that Paul wrote the prison epistles during his first Roman imprisonment. The exact dates are really not known, but the 2-year period he spent under arrest, they narrowed down to AD 60 to 62. And his imprisonment is verified by the book of Acts. But he wrote those books while in jail. God used Paul while he was in prison. And God used Dietrich Bonhoeffer while he was in prison. You know, sometimes we find ourselves, well, you know, I don't feel like watching an online sermon. It's not the same. I'm not in church. Or I don't feel like going to a parking lot and sitting in the car. Now we're back in 2 of the churches. And sometimes we get out of the habit. But we have to celebrate the things of God. You know, while Bonhoeffer was in prison, he was engaged and he missed his parents, and he wrote a letter to them urging them to continue to celebrate even though he was in prison and what was going on in Nazi Germany. And this is what he wrote in the letter. He said, "We can and should also celebrate Christmas despite the ruins around us. I think of you as you now sit with the children and with all the Advent decorations, as in earlier years we did so together. We must do all this even more intensively because we do not know how much longer we have." He wanted his parents to celebrate Christmas even though he wasn't there, because it was a time for celebration, the birth of Christ. And he didn't know how much longer that he would have and they would have to celebrate. We have to celebrate Lent and Easter even though it may be different. You know, this is the first year since I've been a pastor, last year, that I did do a Christmas Eve service, that I wasn't physically in church on Christmas Eve. We got to do our Ash Wednesday service last year. If I missed it, this will be the first year that I did not do an Ash Wednesday service in my churches. But the works of God are still happening. Miracles are still being done. The world has changed, but God is changing hearts one heart at a time. People are showing love to those they don't even know, just as Jesus asked us when he said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." In Luke chapter 6, the heading of my Bible says, "Rules for Kingdom Living." And these are the words of Jesus. "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully use you. To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. But if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the highest, for he is kind to the unthankful and the evil. Therefore be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, Shaken together and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use it, it will be measured back to you. God says, Jesus says, you get what you give. God is moving. God is changing the world one heart at a time. Can you imagine the love in a heart that would drive from Colorado to Charlestown, West Virginia, to get in a 10-mile line of Jeeps and cars, the ultimate traffic jam, to drive by a 4-year-old's house that you've never met? That's love. God is changing hearts. We have a choice. We can sit back and complain about the change. We can say it doesn't feel right, or I don't want to go to the parking lot, or I don't want to wear a mask. Or we can become part of the change God is bringing about. I'll leave you with this from the Old Testament. God says, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curse. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Choose life. Choose to do as Jesus asks us to do, to love others as ourselves, to be merciful, to give. There's so many opportunities to love and to change people's hearts and to do good. But we can't do it if we're sitting back complaining or saying, I don't feel right. It's not like it used to be. God is doing something new, and we have a choice. We can sit back or we can be a part of it. And God says, I put before you blessings and cursing, life and death. Choose life. We got to make the right choice, people. God bless you and have a great day.